and I took Lake City by quote-unquote $1 billion in the play-in game.
On the North Idaho Prepcast, we're all about that North Idaho life.
Man, you talk about Wallace and what they've been able to do this year. Quietly just being, the steady stalwart up north in District 1. They've been dominant.
From Bonners Ferry all the way down to Grangeville, we tackle the biggest stories in North Idaho sports.
This Genesee team is for real. We know what we saw last year. They're I think in the driver's seat to repeat.
It's the North Idaho Prepcast with Ryan Scaggs. Yeah, that's right. Welcome in another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast here on IdahoSports.com, talking Districts 1 and 2, week in, week out in the great state of Idaho. We are coming to you live on Wednesday morning, October 2nd. And we are broadcasting live on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. You can, of course, go back and watch this if you're not here live. You can go back and watch it anytime at those three destinations. You can also listen to the North Idaho Prepcast at IdahoSports.com. All of our Prepcasts are directly to the left on the homepage. They're on the left-hand side of the homepage. And you can also download this podcast wherever you download and subscribe to podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Enough from me, though. Let's bring in our North Idaho resident and expert. It is Ryan Scaggs. Yo, what's up, Scaggs?
Not much. Just a little zip fizz and getting ready for the day,
Yeah. And you've had a little less.
It's been insanely busy, too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you have had a little less zip and fizz in your life because you're coming down off of a little sickness as well.
Yeah, I've had the man cold, so been miserable for my wife probably for the last couple days, but no, I've been functioning fairly well. It's just it usually happens every fall. I get like the whole seasonal sinusitis thing or whatever, as far as my doctor calls it. So yeah. Been fun.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So that being said, we are just going to kind of run through everything and see if we can get in and out without Ryan doing any further damage to his system. Since your CPU operating speed right now is like 65%, right?
Yeah, the processor is a little full right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start with golf because that is the first thing that actually gets going with the postseason here. District golf tournaments are later this week, Ryan. We did have one final kind of regular season tune-up yesterday, Tuesday afternoon up here in District 1. It was the Krause Invitational at the Avondale Golf Club in Hayden. That's a beautiful course.
Really
great
nice
spot.
course. Yeah.
Great spot to end the regular season for sure. Headline, Coeur d'Alene boys win yet again. They put up 324 points to win it. Sub-headline, though, Ryan, they did this without 4 of their top 5 golfers. So
yeah, and then another subline. Carl Barron was the medalist again, I think, for like the 3rd straight week. So from Post Falls. So, there's some good players around, but obviously the team that we've been watching, kind of shine this year has been Coeur d'Alene. But even without 4 of their varsity guys, they didn't really miss a beat, and they still ended up getting another title under their belt.
Yeah. Just incredible what they've been able to do. So whether it was injury or illness, Ryan, it must be going around. The Coeur d'Alene boys still win the team title. Lakeland takes second at 343. So they still won by nearly 20 strokes, which is just remarkable. Carl Barron from Post Falls was the individual medalist. Like you said, he fired a 78. That was 1 stroke better, or actually
he tied with Cook, if I'm not mistaken. It may have been in a playoff. He got the medalist, I think.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say Cook from Coeur d'Alene, Dylan Cook also shot a 78. And then Brady Rupert from Coeur d'Alene, 1 stroke back at 79, along with Jake Jovich from Lakeland. So it was really hotly contested at the top of the leaderboard. But for Barron to hold off all these challengers, it's almost like in other sports where you're battle tested, right? That's going to serve him well, that he has been challenged and has had to win a lot of close events this regular season.
Yeah, and that's been a nice pickup too for Coeur d'Alene with Brady Rupert. He was a Genesis Prep kid, So he came over to Coeur d'Alene. I don't know if it was this year or last year, but he's been with the Vikings now, and he's, kind of showing up. And that's a nice stable of players. Coeur d'Alene's got a really nice lineup. I mean, if they're able to get, scores in the 70s and they're missing some of their firepower, I think Ben Falk didn't play either. So, like that bodes well for Coeur d'Alene for postseason play. And now districts open up at Coeur d'Alene Golf Course, which is another nice public course here in town. And that's where the 6A district tournament will be. And, if everybody's back at full strength, I mean, that you could see some nice scores coming out of Coeur d'Alene this week.
Yeah, so district golf coming up here. We will recap it on next week's edition of the North Idaho Prepcast. 6A district, the Inland Empire League, District 1-2 for both of these 6A, 5A. The 6A meet, as you said, Ryan, is going to be held at the Coeur d'Alene Public Golf Course. That is going to be tomorrow, Thursday. The 5A tournament is also tomorrow, Thursday, October 3rd. It is at the Links in Drum. So
yeah, that's a fun course too. I mean, the Links is an interesting course because it favors the guys that shoot long. I don't know if you've ever played there or not, but they've got I think it's a par 6. It's well over 500 yards long. That's one of their marquee holes. They actually made it one of the longest public holes in the United States. That course plays long. It's favorable. It's wide open. But if the wind's blowing a little bit, it makes things interesting once you get close to the greens. But that's another course that you could see some low scores at the 5A ranks as well.
Interesting. Okay. Teams we're keeping an eye on in terms of, district champions, certainly Coeur d'Alene for both boys and girls. Sandpoint girls. I think on the boys side for the 5A, Moscow is going to be tough. Lewiston also, I think.
Lakeland's tough too.
Lakeland, yes. Yeah, Lakeland just took second, right?
Yeah, Lakeland's got some players too. So, that is going to be interesting to see who comes out with that district title this weekend.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. So, yes, the first postseason event almost here Thursday in Coeur d'Alene and Rathdrum, respectively. So, if you're in North Idaho, I don't know, you could probably see some of it from the respective clubhouse, but
yeah. But also, I mean, the weather's been great and the course conditions are phenomenal. Fall golf up here, once you get into October, the first couple of weeks, it's great. I mean, the grass is in awesome condition, and I know that, they've been played on pretty heavily over the summer, but they respond really well. And I would expect to see some good scores. I mean, we've seen scores dropping the last week or two. But not to go nerd out on golf, but we could really see some guys probably break par. It's a distinct possibility.
Yep, it's going to be really fun. And we'll have all the results for you next week here on the North Idaho Prep, and then the state meet coming up pretty quickly as well. Okay, let's talk soccer real quick. We did pretty heavy soccer content last week on the show, but I just wanted to give a shout out to a team we haven't really been able to much this year, and that is the St. Mary's girls. You know what? Let me double check this. Okay, I had the wrong score put in, Ryan. Let me reverse course here. We're still going to give St. Mary's a shout out because they've had a trying season. The fact that they just have been able to have a boys and a girls soccer team is remarkable because they have very low numbers in their program, but they always seem to find enough kids to stick it out. Bonners Ferry gets the sweep over St. Mary's yesterday. The boys win 6-0. The girls win 6-1. So for Bonners Ferry, they continue to be right there in the mix in that 4A Intermountain League soccer district. Coeur d'Alene Charter has shown some chinks in the armor here. The boys team had a draw with Grangeville, I think, last weekend, and the girls team is not as dominant as they've been in years past, right? They've had a couple of tight matchups with Timberlake, I know. So this is the interesting district I'm keeping an eye on as we get towards the end of the regular season here. Yeah,
and to go into the play, like St. Mary's is 1-6-1 on the year, and Bonners 7-6. They've got a winning record, and I think they're playing Coeur d'Alene Charter tonight. So I mean, there's the season's in the waning moments, and I think some of the more notable games happened at the 5A, 6A ranks yesterday. But just to kind of hit on soccer a little bit, I mean, Coeur d'Alene boys got their revenge on Sandpoint. They lost 4-1 last week or 2 weeks ago, and then last night they blanked Sandpoint 5-0. And then Sandpoint girls got a big win over Coeur d'Alene last night as well. So They're going to play Lakeland on Thursday. So we're rolling into district play, and we're getting all these interesting matchups that have been taking place in the crossover 6A, 5A matches in that IEL, and just an ultra competitive conference. I mean, you look at the balance that's kind of taken place between there's not a lot of distance between those 6A and 5A teams. But yeah, I know I kind of skipped over.
And Lake City got revenge.
3A ranks. 3A has been kind of just we've seen it dominant by Coeur d'Alene Charter over the years, but you've seen Timberlake, come into the picture in girls soccer, and on the boys side too. Bonners Ferry's in the mix, also throwing their hat in the ring. So it's a competitive league. District plays can be interesting. Yeah,
for sure. And I'll circle back to the big schools too, because you're right. I'm not trying to dismiss what's going on there, because there are intriguing races there also. Like big storyline on the boys side, I thought was Lake City beating Coeur d'Alene last Tuesday 2-1 after they had split. So they've split basically. Coeur d'Alene won 1-0. Lake City won 2-1. But because Lake City has a draw on the ledger, Coeur d'Alene right now favored to be the regular season champ. Ultimately, doesn't really matter. It's just the two Coeur d'Alene schools. So Coeur d'Alene, I guess we'll get to host on that nice turf, potentially the district championship. On the girls' side for 6A, kind of a similar story, right? It's Lake City, it's Coeur d'Alene. This one a little more clear cut though. Lake City heavily favored, 10-2 overall, 5-2 in the conference. Those losses have come to some of those 5A programs. That to me is where the interesting race is on the girls' side at 5A in the Empire League, where Lewiston very quietly 11-3. And I think they want to keep it that way. Moscow and Sandpoint were used to being the two big powers here, but Lewiston in their first year dropping down, it's been very competitive.
Yeah, and Lakeland's in there, 3-4 in conference, 3-4-1, I should say, but 7-4-1 overall. Like, you look at that 5A, I mean, that's pretty. The three, it's 5 teams this year because Post Falls obviously got the opt down, but they haven't really been a factor in girls soccer. But Lewiston, I mean, making hay with that, classification drop for the Bengals. I mean, you've been able to see the program was strong anyways. I mean, you look at the record, it would be the same if they were a 6A school. So they play the same schedule. So, I mean, that really says a lot about the balance of this league. And Lake City obviously has been kind of the top of the heap at 6A between the two programs. But Lake City will get to host districts for the girls on 6A side, and then obviously Coeur d'Alene gets to host because they didn't have the draw on the boys side. But pretty compelling, intriguing matchups and stuff. And the Lewiston's like kind of sitting here going, man, we almost didn't need to drop a classification in girls soccer. We could have been, chance to go into state at 6A this year. But I think, at 5A, they're going to be definitely in contention for, maybe a placing at the state tournament if things go well in the district tournament. Yeah.
Blessing in disguise is that because it's a 5-team district now with Lakeland, Moscow, Sandpoint, plus the drop downs, Lewiston and Post Falls, they get 1.5 bids to state this year, Ryan. So whoever takes second at districts is going to have a chance to play the third place team from District 3 in the state play-in match. On the girls' side, I think North Idaho gets 2 teams, whether it's Lewiston, Moscow, Sandpoint, maybe Lakeland goes on a dark horse run. We'll see. On the boys' side, it might be a little tougher. There's some really good boys soccer teams down there in the Treasure Valley this year. But either way, 2 bites at the apple, which is just huge for soccer this year.
I mean, if you want to, kind of future cast a little bit, Middleton and Valley View, obviously the top of the heap at 5A SIC, but outside of them, I mean, the third place team right now is Skyview. Caldwell's in the mix too. I think our number 2 up north clips that team. And, realistically, we get 2 into the state tournament with, a very competitive field. I mean, the High Country Conference is pretty solid with Hillcrest and Skyline, in the top there. Twin Falls is good. Mountain Home's having a heck of a season too. So it's going to be a really competitive field. And, we're going to see, some of those teams that haven't necessarily been the historical, kings of the hill in 5A ranks. We might get a surprise this year in the state championship match. It'd be interesting to see how it goes.
Right. And then just to wrap up where we started this conversation with the 4A Intermountain League, here's our good friend Max Oswald from the Bonner County Daily Bee. I'll be covering the Badgers district soccer tournaments. Should be fun. Yeah, in case, Max is already a pretty busy guy, but not only is he, doing Bonner County Daily Bee stuff, he's also doing Bonners Ferry Herald work now too. Yeah. So congratulations, Max. to be in sports media these days, you really do have to have, it's very rare anymore to have just the one place of employment, right? It's like, I do a little work here, I do a little work here. You got to have a lot of different revenue streams to make it work in sports media. And so I'm so glad that Max is able to take that on as well. And the Bonners Ferry readers, you're getting a really good, talented writer too. So it's going to be a good match.
We beat this drum, but I mean, people, I hope you're not taking it for granted, the folks that we've got working in print media in the high school sports ranks in North Idaho. When you got Max up north and you go down here in Coeur d'Alene with the guys that are at the Coeur d'Alene Press, do a phenomenal job, Jason and Mark. And then you go down to Lewiston and they do a great job too with the Trib down there. And even in Moscow, I mean, it's awesome. I mean, we're lucky up here because you go to every single print media outlet and those guys are all in and they do a phenomenal job. And so, I mean, it makes our job easy to just do a weekly prepcast, kind of, staying in touch with them, but it makes things easy because they do such a thorough job with what they do. Reporting the results and talking about this stuff's really easy. They do a great job kind of doing almost show prep for us.
Yeah, it's a nice relationship we have, definitely with our media partners. We kind of have all the data, and then they're the ones that are actually, out at the games most of the time. But we can help with that statewide view. And all you have to do is look at coverage in any other part of the state of Idaho. And again, this is not I'm not saying this against any individuals. It's really the parent companies. A lot of newspapers nationwide are owned by big conglomerations that are looking to do everything on the cheap. And they cut a lot of corners and they hamstring a lot of talented writers in the state of Idaho. Through no fault of the writers, they are handcuffed a lot to what they can go cover. And so it's really the parent companies, these big corporations that have no idea. And that's why the newspaper industry has been in decline a little bit, but not up here in North Idaho. So
no, we're ahead of the game here. I mean, and our folks, I'll just say it again, they do a phenomenal job, and hats off to Max. And I was going to make a joke about Max, like, hey, can I get the article about the Bonners Ferry girls soccer team from 4.5 weeks ago? Can you go ahead and email that to me? He might chuckle at that one because I was making fun or poking fun at him last week because he was saying how difficult it was with the inundation of emails he gets from parents all around the area of how busy he is. He's not sending links to things. People can go look for it himself. There it is right there.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, cool. Well, we're looking forward to your coverage, Max, especially from that 4A. And obviously he'll be covering Sandpoint as well and what they're doing in the 5A ranks. Also, big match tonight, Ryan. Bonners Ferry hosting Coeur d'Alene Charter this evening. So that's going to be huge on the girls' side. Coeur d'Alene Charter got a 2-0 win last week, and now we've got the return match here. A win by Coeur d'Alene Charter wraps up that number 1 seed for the girls side of things. So, all right, let's wrap up with volleyball here. A lot of North Idaho teams were competing in the Sheridan Welch Crossover Classic last week in Spokane, and it was at various high schools. I saw Ferris was hosting some stuff. I think maybe Shadle Park was hosting some stuff. Really, it's a community effort, and they call it the Crossover Classic because, well, it's Washington's best against Idaho's best, and we all kind of cross over and play each other. They had 4 different brackets of competition. It was pool play at first, and so you saw some like Genesis Prep ended up playing some like really big Washington schools and kind of held their own a little bit. But it ended up being a gold bracket, silver bracket, a bronze bracket, and then the copper bracket. So I thought we could just run through how everybody finished in their respective brackets. And if you want to see all the results, you can, of course, go team by team at IdahoSports.com. We have all of the schedules and results for all of the high school volleyball teams. But in the gold bracket, Ryan, we had Lake City and Lakeland each advanced to the semifinals. Lakeland falls to Wenatchee 2-0 in the first semifinal. Lake City then falls to Glacier Peak 2-0 in the other semifinal. So that's not bad. Semifinal gold bracket for Lakeland and Lake City. You know, we've talked a lot about Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls in 6A volleyball this year. You know, don't sleep on Lake City. They're pretty good too.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that. Like, I mean, you look at, Wenatchee's, I believe there's still a 4A Washington school, and Lakeland taking. I mean, that's like playing Lakeland going and playing, Rocky Mountain. So, I mean, as far as student size, and then Glacier Peak is out of Snohomish. That's another really large school, and so to hold your own with those programs, that just kind of talks about the level of play that we've got up here up north. That a lot of these teams are just really good, and just showing itself. I mean, you go play it, you don't know anything about your opponent. You just show up and play, and Lakeland can show up and play with anybody, and they showed that this weekend.
Yeah, Post Falls also was in that gold bracket. They lost their opening round match in bracket play, which dropped them into the consolation bracket. They reached the semifinals of the consolation bracket, where they fell to Central Valley from Spokane. They're 2-0. So way to go, Post Falls, also qualifying for that gold bracket, because you get seeded based upon how you did in pool play. And so Post Falls, Lakeland, Lake City all did really well in pool play, got into that gold bracket. In the silver bracket, we had Sandpoint qualify for the silver bracket. They fell right away in their silver bracket matchup, but they got all the way to the consolation final, where they fell to White River, Washington, 2-0. I'll admit, I'm not sure where White River is, but they looked like they were pretty good this weekend.
I want to say it's from Enumclaw. So it's over on the west side. I know my Washington schools well enough, just from my time being in the state of Washington. I'm pretty sure that they're in Enumclaw. I'd put money on that one. But yeah, that's another. I mean, I believe they're a 2A school, which it's comparable size. Sandpoint would be a 2A school in the state of Washington. So a program over there on the west side of Washington, holding your own. I mean, that's Sandpoint. It's a battle back, after dropping your first match and making your way all the way back to the consolation final that's a good lift for that team as they approach district play.
Yep. Bronze bracket. We had competing in the bronze bracket. We had Genesis Prep, we had Troy, and we had Kellogg. And we also had Capital High School from Boise. They came up and competed in this thing. Capital and Kellogg had to play each other right away in the bronze bracket. Capital, not surprisingly, won that matchup 2-0. And then so that bounced Kellogg into the consolation part of the bracket. Genesis Prep fell in their bracket opener as well. So G Prep was also in that consolation bracket. But Troy got to the semifinals of the bronze bracket. They beat Cheney in their first matchup. That's a significantly larger school than Troy.
School, yeah.
Then they beat Oakdale. That's pretty comparable to Troy, right?
Yeah, it's comparable. Oakdale is that's a volleyball powerhouse in the state of Washington. They're Eastern Washington school, but that team historically is an absolute factory for volleyball players.
Yeah, so they beat Cheney and they beat Oakdale, and then they had to play Capital from Boise, a 6A school in the semifinals. They lost, but they didn't get swept. They won a set, so they lost 2-1. It was a best of 3. So for Troy, I mean, that's very encouraging that you took a 6A Idaho school to the third and decisive set.
Yeah, that says a lot. I mean, we knew Troy's really good. Their league is good. I mean, we haven't talked a ton about the White Pine. I mean, we mentioned a little bit last week with them, but with Potlatch being the up-and-coming team in that conference. But district play, that tournament is as good as the state tournament some years, and that's, I think, kind of leaning that direction again this year, just with the balance of power that they have within that league. But we prognosticate a little bit at the beginning of the year, and I don't know, did you pick Troy to win it all this year? I can't remember. It's kind of a safe bet, knowing Troy's history. But yeah, I mean, that Trojan team, for them to take a 6A team to the wire like that and get a set from them doesn't surprise me. But those weird crossovers, the 2A and 3A schools playing a 6A school, that's what's cool about these tournaments. You get to see some of the small schools. What do they have in their arsenal to step up the plate and play some of those bigger teams? And it's really neat to see a small school hold their own.
Yeah, my official championship picks at the very start of the season were Skyview for 6A, Lakeland for 5A, Fruitland for 4A, Melba for 3A, Troy for 2A, Horseshoe Bend for 1A. A lot of the same teams because they're just factories at this point, but we'll see how my picks do down the stretch here.
So standing on that with Owyhee at 6A right now, but I don't want to. We can talk about that with Logan. But
yes. Hawaii did beat Skyview last week in a tight match, but yes, I will stand by Skyview. Okay. The bronze consolation bracket, G Prep lost right away. They went 2-0. They lost to Liberty 2-0. Kellogg, though, got to the semifinals of the consolation bracket before they fell to the town so nice they named it twice, Walla Walla. So there was, so back in the day, I'm obviously a Montana Grizzly fan. I grew up in Missoula, and they've broadcast their games on local TV forever and ever and ever. And there was a stretch there for about 10 years where they would, almost like Sunday Night Football, they would take the Grizz players and record them to like, hey, let's meet the starting defense. And the guy would say, his name and where he was from. And they had this defensive tackle, Craig Metler. He would always, Craig Metler, the town's so nice, they named it twice, Walla Walla, Washington. That's what he would say every time for his little thing. So that's always stuck with me. But anyways, nobody cares about that. Kellogg falls to Walla Walla, 2-0. G Prep falls to Liberty, but G Prep back in Idaho play last night beats Lakeside and wins their first conference championship in school history.
Yeah, that's an awesome deal for that group and for that program. And, the team, if they roll through district play and win the district tournament, they get an outright bid into state, which would be massive. I mean, that's kind of one of those feel-good stories on the season that we've seen so far this year. And that Jags team has earned it. And they played a relatively tough schedule too. I mean, if you go back and look, they're 5-0 in league play. But, they're 8-7 overall. But those 7 losses, if you go look at their schedule, I mean, it's to Timberlake, Bonners Ferry, Timberlake again, Liberty, Kennewick, Eastlake, Lakeside of Washington. I mean, those are all schools way bigger than them, way bigger. That says a ton about Genesis Prep and where they stand right now in the volleyball world. That's a solid program. That's a really tough team. I mean, record is deceiving with that group. They play teams their own size. They've been scrapping and holding their own.
Yeah. What did you say their record was?
8-7. Yeah,
I think they picked up like 5 of those 7 losses this weekend at the Sheridan Welch Crossover Classic, playing much bigger competition. So yeah. Don't look into that too much. And you mentioned one of their losses was to Bonners Ferry. Bonners came out and performed pretty well at the Crossover Classic as well. They actually had to play Troy in pool play early on Saturday and fell 2-0, but they got on a little bit of a run in that Copper consolation bracket. They beat in order St. John Endicott and then East Valley from Spokane. And then they beat the Mount Spokane JV, but Mount Spokane, very big school. So
Bonners, a good program.
Bonners wins the Copper consolation bracket. Way to go, Badgers.
Yeah, and I think Troy winning 2-0. I mean, that's awesome to get Troy getting a win over Bonners Ferry. I mean, we talk about those beating those bigger schools, and these smaller teams are holding their own, and that says a lot. And kudos to the Badgers too for showing up there. I mean, like, you look at their schedule and who they had to play. They had to play some good teams, especially early on, playing Central Valley and Reardon. Reardon is a similar, a little bit smaller school than Bonners Ferry, but Reardon in their own right. And I mean, that's a really strong program. So we can nerd out on volleyball about that event, but it's really neat to kind of see where you stack up, because there's teams from all over the Northwest. It wasn't just the best of Spokane playing the best of Coeur d'Alene in North Idaho. I mean, there was tons of teams from Tacoma, Seattle, the surrounding areas there, but also Southern Idaho came up there represented as well. So just a neat event. I mean, I really like how they do that. And it's kind of similar to the Inland Empire Tennis Tournament, where you just get the best of the best from around the region between Washington and Idaho.
Yep. And then just to wrap up, Genesee also was in there competing in the Copper consolation bracket. They had to play Thomas Jefferson right away. They won that matchup. No idea where Thomas Jefferson High School is in Washington, but
it's kind of between Kent and Federal Way. So,
okay. So suburb of Seattle, basically.
Yeah, suburb of Seattle. My in-laws used to live like about a half mile away from that school. That's the only way I know that. So, yeah.
That's why you're a perfect fit for this show. You know Washington better than most. And then they fell to that Mount Spokane JV in the semifinals. So it was a nice tournament run for Genesee there. We'll wrap up just quickly. Coeur d'Alene volleyball. They were also competing, not at the Sheridan Welch Crossover Classic. They went to Rexburg to compete in the Battle of the Best tournament hosted by Madison. not a bad move for Coeur d'Alene. Madison was there. A lot of Boise's best 6A teams were there. They got some really good competition. They lost to Hillcrest in pool play 2-1. I was a little surprised by that. And then they lost to Rigby Saturday morning in pool play 2-1. And then they got to the semifinals of the bracket play where they lost to Mountain View 2-0. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good trip south for the Coeur d'Alene girls. And then they wrapped up the regular season 6A Inland Empire League title last night as well with a victory over Post Falls.
Yeah. And I mean, that's, Coeur d'Alene's a solid team. I mean, you look at their overall record. Hillcrest, I don't look at that loss as something to be too scared about. Hillcrest is having a great year. That's a really good team down there in southeastern Idaho. So I think it could be a good wake-up call for the Vikings. Obviously, they responded, but they're going to open the best of 3 series with Lake City for district play. So that'll be interesting to see. I still think Coeur d'Alene could play and compete pretty well at the state tournament. They've done really well with some of the SIC schools earlier in the year, but obviously you talked about Skyview. Owaihi's out there too, having a phenomenal season as well. So they've got their hands full with you kind of prognosticate who could make it in based upon record overall. You kind of look how it would seed. That 6A tournament's going to be tough. I mean, it really is. I mean, there's some really good teams in there. But Coeur d'Alene's good in their own right. So, I mean, to get a top 4 finish at state, I think is a huge win for that program based upon how good the 6A is in volleyball this year.
Yep, for sure. All right. One last comment from Max, and then we'll dip out of here. We were talking a lot about the small schools, right? Troy and Genesee and G Prep. And Max says, speaking of small schools, I'm headed with Clark Fork football to their game at Lewis County on Saturday. If you guys need any stats, I'll have the full box score. Max, I would love that.
Man, right there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would take a copy of that Clark Fork Wampus Cats roster too. We're trying to get every roster up on our site, IdahoSports.com. That's one of the elusive ones I haven't been able to get yet. So I would take both of those things, Max. You are the man. Definitely.
Yeah, that's the awesome man of the people. I'll tell you what. He could run for like public office at some point up there, just because of the relationships that he's building with all those communities. But yeah, no, he does the hard work, and I mean, putting in the miles too. He's going to hop on a bus and then go down there with the group. Hats off, man. Like, he could be doing other things like watching college football and scoreboard watching there, but he's going to go on that trip down to Craigmont for that game. So, which is an intriguing matchup. I mean, a crossover game. We saw the North Star teams, or the Scenic Idaho teams play those White Pine schools last week. We saw a handful of those games, and I think it's an intriguing matchup. It could be a competitive game.
Yeah, Lakeside beat Genesee, and then Deary beat Coeur d'Alene. And this week, Wallace plays Genesee. So Genesee is playing the 2 best teams. Will tell us a lot about where Genesee stands after all of this. But pretty light on the football content this week, Ryan. And for those that are looking for their football fix, you can tune in to Gem State Game Day Thursday morning, live on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account at 7 a.m. Pacific time. You can, of course, watch it anytime after that Thursday and or Friday. This week's Gem State Game Day, Ryan, for the first time, we're dusting off the brackets. We're doing if the playoffs started today, here's what the brackets would look like. Here's what the seedings would look like, who's in, who's out, the Max Preps rankings, because we are into October. That's my rule. Once we hit October, then I start talking Max Preps and brackets. So if you want to see all of that great stuff, tune in Thursday morning to Gem State Game Day. We're going to do it for every classification right here on IdahoSports.com.
Yeah, get yourself a cup of coffee and join in the crew. It's always a good time, and enjoy watching you guys if I'm not doing the broadcast myself, but it's kind of nice to kind of just sit there and instead of having to read the paper, I sit there and listen to you guys and end up drinking some coffee and kind of wake up for the day. And you get to go over the prognostications and make our picks and everything for the week. But obviously I won't brag, but didn't have too bad of a week last week. So, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we like our pick sixes, but I'm holding my own this year, so holding down the fort for up north. But yeah, no, you guys do a great job with that, and you do a great job leading the show, and it's the marching band of nowhere. So,
and there's our podcast title, folks.
But yeah, it's a ton of fun, and I mean, for being the inaugural season of doing it, our crew does such a good job with that, and I don't want to pat myself. I can't pat myself on the back. I think, our broadcasters statewide just do such a good job of staying connected with their, districts and regions and knowing the schools and the kids and everything else in and out that it's a ton of fun to watch that. So folks are listening to this, Gem State game day. It's great. I mean, if you're a high school, football geek and you want to hear your kid's name called or you want to talk about stuff, jump in the chat, drop some comments because you guys are super interactive and it's a ton of fun.
Yep, we love it. So Gem State game day this Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific time on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. All right. Thank you for tuning into the North Idaho Prepcast, everybody. Enjoy the competition this upcoming week. We'll be back here to break it all down again next week. For Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in on Idaho Sports.